The cockpit door slammed harder than it needed to. The sound cracked through the narrow metal tube like a gunshot, sharp enough to make the junior flight attendant outside flinch and look down at her shoes. Inside, the air felt instantly smaller, tighter, as if the plane itself had inhaled and refused to let go. Captain Robert Caldwell did not turn around. He sat rigid in the left seat. Shoulders squared, hands resting on the armrests with practiced ownership. 63 years old, 38 years in the air. He had been flying jets since cockpits still smelled like burnt coffee and cigarette smoke. The kind of man whose name lingered in training manuals and union meetings long after he left the room. Behind him, a woman stood quietly, her flight bag still strapped across her shoulder. First Officer Denise Carter waited. Her posture was straight but not stiff, calm but not submissive. She had learned long ago that in rooms like this, stillness could be louder than words. The cockpit lights reflected faintly off the metal frame of her glasses. Her breathing was slow, measured. She had not rushed. She never rushed. Caldwell adjusted the brim of his captain's hat on the glare shield just enough to remind the room who owned the space. "You're late," he said, voice flat. Not loud, not angry, worse than both. Denise glanced at the clock above the instrument panel. Boarding had not begun. They were still ahead of schedule. She knew that. He knew that. The lie was ceremonial. "I arrived when crew scheduling instructed," she replied evenly. Caldwell exhaled through his nose, a thin smile pulling at one corner of his mouth. He finally turned his head just enough to look at her out of the corner of his eye. The look was not hostile. It was assessing, as if she were a piece of equipment that did not belong in this aircraft. "This route," he said, tapping the flight plan with one finger, "is not a training flight." Denise set her bag down in the storage compartment with deliberate care. The zipper sounded too loud in the silence. "I'm aware," she said. "I've flown transatlantic for over a decade." He hummed, unconvinced. The sound carried judgment without accusation. He looked her up and down now openly. The uniform fit her well. Tailored, worn by someone who respected it. 3 stripes on her epaulettes, earned, not decorative. Still, something in his jaw tightened. "Crew chemistry matters," Caldwell said. "You and I haven't flown together." "That's true," Denise said. "That's why the checklist exists." He chuckled low and dry, then reached for his coffee. The cup rattled faintly against the console. Outside the windshield, the grey Texas sky pressed low over the runway, heavy with early heat and distant thunder. "This isn't about checklists," he said. "It's about instinct." Denise met his eyes now. Brown, steady, unblinking. "Instinct is not a disqualifier," she said. That did it. Caldwell turned fully in his seat. The movement was sudden, sharp. He was a big man, broad shoulders, thick hands, the kind of physical presence that filled a room even when he said nothing. He leaned back slightly, blocking the right seat with his elbow, casual but unmistakable. "Let's not make this complicated," he said. "I'm not comfortable flying this leg with you." The words dropped cleanly. No insult, no slur, no raised voice. Just a statement delivered the way men like Caldwell delivered verdicts. For a fraction of a second, the cockpit seemed to hold its breath. Denise did not react the way he expected. She did not argue. She did not ask why. She simply tilted her head the smallest movement, as if aligning a camera lens. "Captain," she said carefully, "are you refusing this flight assignment?" Caldwell's lips pressed together. He did not like the phrasing. It sounded official, documented, dangerous. "I'm saying," he replied, "choosing each word that this aircraft will not depart under my command unless I have a crew I trust." Trust. The word hung there, polished and hollow. Outside the cockpit, footsteps passed. Laughter. The faint clatter of boarding carts being staged. The world moved on, unaware that something fundamental had just cracked open behind a reinforced door. Denise studied him, not with anger, with something colder. Calculation. She had seen this before. Not here. Not in this exact configuration. But the pattern was familiar. The way authority disguised fear as principle. The way discomfort dressed itself up as professionalism. She thought of the report she had read 3 weeks earlier. Anonymous complaints, a pattern of crew changes, a tendency to invoke safety concerns without specifics, always just enough to stay inside the lines, always just enough. "Understood," she said, finally. She reached for her flight bag. Caldwell watched closely, relief flickering in his eyes before he could stop it. He straightened, already rehearsing how he would explain the delay. "Crew scheduling error. Nothing personal. Happens all the time." Denise paused at the cockpit door. "One more thing," she said without turning around. He sighed impatience, creeping in now. "What is it?" She looked back at him. Really looked this time. The years etched into his face. The confidence built on decades of unchecked authority. The certainty that the system would bend before he did. "I want to be clear," she said. "This decision is yours." Caldwell waved a dismissive hand. "I've been clear since you walked in." Denise nodded once. Then she stepped out into the jet bridge. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Not a slam, not dramatic. Just final. Caldwell leaned back in his seat and exhaled long and satisfied. He picked up his coffee again, unaware that his hand was shaking slightly. Outside, Denise stopped just past the threshold. The hum of the terminal wrapped around her. Voices, announcements, the distant roar of another aircraft lifting off. She did not rush. She did not pull out her phone immediately. She looked back through the small cockpit window in the door, saw Caldwell settling in, saw him reach for the checklist like nothing of consequence had happened. Then she turned away. In a quiet corner near the gate desk, Denise Carter finally took out her phone. Her thumb hovered for a moment over the screen. Not because she was unsure, because once she made this call, there would be no undoing it. She selected a contact labeled simply, "Compliance Priority." The line rang once, then twice. As it connected, Denise glanced up at the departure board. Flight number, destination, on time. For now. "Denise Carter," she said into the phone, her voice steady. "I need to initiate a formal review." "Yes." "Right now." She listened, nodded once. "No," she added. "This isn't a misunderstanding." Her eyes hardened, reflecting the bright terminal lights. This is a pattern. The first sign that something was wrong was the delay code flashing red on the gate monitor. Not cancelled, not reassigned, delayed, vague, indefinite. Passengers began to shift their weight, the way people did when plans quietly cracked beneath them. A man in a navy blazer checked his watch for the third time in a minute. A woman near the window muttered that she had a connection in Munich and no patience left for excuses. The gate agent straightened her spine and forced a smile that did not reach her eyes. Inside the cockpit, Captain Caldwell noticed none of it. He was already rehearsing the version of events that would protect him. Crew scheduling error, mismatch, nothing personal. He had used those words before, watched them glide through paperwork without resistance. The system liked neat explanations. It liked senior captains. It trusted men who had been around long enough to be considered part of the aircraft itself. He reached for the checklist again, fingers tapping faster than necessary. Outside, Denise Carter stood still. She had stepped away from the gate desk and leaned against the cool glass wall overlooking the tarmac. The plane sat there like a patient animal, nose angled slightly left, rain streaks drying into faint chalk lines across the fuselage. Ground crew moved with mechanical precision, unaware that the flight had already been compromised, long before anyone touched the throttle. Her phone vibrated softly in her hand. "This is Laura Simmons," a voice said. Calm, controlled, legal training wrapped in velvet. "Chief Compliance Counsel, I understand you're initiating a review." "Yes," Denise replied. "Immediate." A pause. "Not surprise." "Calculation." "Location," Simmons asked. "Dallas, Fort Worth. International departure. Captain refusal based on subjective discomfort." Another pause. Longer this time. "Has he documented safety concerns?" "No," Denise said. "He blocked my access to the right seat and stated the aircraft would not depart under his command." Silence stretched across the line. Denise could picture Simmons already mapping consequences, tracing liability like a chessboard. Denise did not fill the space. She let the truth sit where it belonged. "Understood," Simmons said, finally. "Regional oversight is already on site. They will board. Until then, do not engage." "I wasn't planning to," Denise replied. She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her pocket. A few feet away, the gate agent cleared her throat. "Ma'am," she said quietly. "They're asking questions." Denise nodded and walked back toward the counter. A man with grey hair and wire rim glasses stepped forward first. 65, maybe older, veteran posture. The kind of man who had worked his whole life and expected systems to function the way they were built. "What's the holdup?" he asked. "We were supposed to board 10 minutes ago." Denise met his eyes. She did not apologize. She did not deflect. "There's an operational issue," she said. "We're addressing it." He studied her uniform. The stripes, the calm. Something in his expression softened, though frustration still pulsed beneath it. "Safety?" he asked. "Yes," Denise said. Truthfully. That seemed to satisfy him, at least for the moment. He stepped back, folding his arms, waiting. Behind him, a younger man scoffed. "They always say that," he muttered to no one in particular, "means someone screwed up." Denise heard him. She let it pass. Inside the cockpit, Caldwell finally noticed the absence. Where the right seat should have been occupied, there was only empty leather and a faint impression where someone had almost sat down. He frowned, irritation flaring. This was taking too long. Crew scheduling should have sent a replacement by now. Someone younger. Someone pliable. The cockpit door opened. Caldwell turned sharply, already preparing the tone he would use. Instead of a junior pilot, 2 people stepped in. One was a man in his early 50s, tall, lean, wearing a charcoal suit instead of a uniform. The other was a woman carrying a tablet. Her expression neutral but alert. Both wore badges clipped at their waists, understated but unmistakable. "Captain Caldwell," the man said. "I'm Mark Reynolds, Regional Flight Operations." Caldwell's jaw tightened. He stood, slowly smoothing the front of his jacket. "Didn't expect a full inspection," he said. "This could have been handled with a phone call." Reynolds glanced at the empty seat, then back at Caldwell. "So we've been told." The woman stepped forward. "Captain, we need you to walk us through what happened." Caldwell laughed, once sharp and humorless. "You mean the mismatch? I already explained that to scheduling." "We'd like to hear it directly," Reynolds said. Caldwell crossed his arms. The posture was defensive now, though he would never admit it. "I didn't feel confident," he said. "Crew cohesion matters, especially on long-haul international flights. You don't throw people together last minute and hope for the best." The woman tapped something into her tablet. "Did First Officer Carter exhibit any unsafe behavior?" "No," Caldwell said quickly. "Too quickly." "But that's not the point." Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "Then what is?" Caldwell hesitated. "Just a beat. Enough to matter." "I trust certain crews," he said. "People I know. I've earned that discretion." Reynolds nodded slowly. "Discretion doesn't override assignment." Caldwell bristled. "After nearly 4 decades, I think I know what keeps a plane in the air." The woman finally looked up. Her eyes were sharp, analytical, and yet she said you delayed an international departure without documented cause. Caldwell opened his mouth to respond when the cockpit door opened again. Denise Carter stepped inside. The temperature in the room shifted. Caldwell's face flushed. "What is she doing here?" Reynolds turned. "We asked her to join us." Denise did not address Caldwell. She stood beside Reynolds, hands clasped loosely behind her back. Calm, unimpressed. "This is unnecessary," Caldwell snapped. "I've already made my position clear." Denise spoke, then her voice quiet but precise. "And we've recorded it." Caldwell stared at her. "Recorded what?" "The refusal," Denise said. "The obstruction. The condition you placed on departure." The woman with the tablet nodded. "Audio and witness corroboration." Caldwell's confidence wavered. Just slightly. He felt it and hated her for noticing. "This is turning into something it doesn't need to be," he said. "We all want the same thing." "Do we?" Denise asked. The question was not aggressive. It was surgical. Reynolds cleared his throat. "Captain Caldwell, effective immediately. You are relieved of duty pending review. Please collect your personal items." The words landed with a dull thud. Caldwell stared at Reynolds, then at Denise, then back again. "You can't do that," he said. "I haven't violated anything." Reynolds's tone did not change. That determination will be made by the review board. Caldwell laughed louder now. This is ridiculous. You're grounding me because someone got offended. Denise finally met his gaze. Her eyes were steady, older, tired in a way that came from carrying weight for a long time. No, she said. You grounded yourself. Outside the cockpit, the announcement chimed softly over the terminal speakers. Boarding delayed. Further updates to follow. At the gate, passengers leaned closer to their phones. A few had begun recording not out of outrage, but instinct. Years of watching institutions fail had taught them to document first and judge later. Denise stepped back out into the terminal as Caldwell was escorted down the jet bridge, his protests growing quieter with every step. She did not watch him go. Instead, she looked at the aircraft again. The weight of it. The history. The people who trusted it without ever knowing who truly held the controls. Her phone vibrated once more. A new message from Laura Simmons. Proceeding to Phase 2. Board notification authorized. Denise closed her eyes briefly. This was only the beginning. The terminal did not erupt the way people imagined moments like this did. There was no shouting, no applause, no collective gasp, just a low, restless murmur, spreading like a draft through a room where the windows had been cracked open without warning. Passengers glanced up at the departure board again, then at their phones, then at one another, silently negotiating how much inconvenience they were willing to tolerate before anger became justified. At the gate desk, the agent's fingers hovered above the keyboard. Her training told her to keep things calm. Her instincts told her this was no ordinary delay. Denise Carter stood a few steps away, just far enough to avoid being mistaken for the person in charge, close enough to hear everything. A man in a tan windbreaker leaned toward the counter. "So what's the real story?" he asked, lowering his voice as if secrets traveled faster than announcements. "Pilot sick." The agent smiled tightly. "We're awaiting updated crew confirmation, sir." "That's not what I asked," the man said. Denise watched the exchange without intervening. She had learned over years of command and years without it that people believed what they were ready to hear. Right now they wanted something simple. Mechanical issue. Weather. Anything that did not suggest the problem wore a uniform. Behind the scenes, the system was moving. Emails rippled through internal servers. Compliance flagged incident codes. Legal cross-referenced prior reports. Names surfaced. Dates aligned. A quiet pattern began to form, not loud enough yet to justify action beyond procedure, but clear enough to make ignoring it impossible. Inside a small conference room near the terminal offices, Mark Reynolds removed his jacket and loosened his tie. He stood at the head of the table, palms flat against the polished surface, staring down at the tablet in front of him. "This isn't isolated," he said finally. The woman beside him. Julia Park from Corporate Ethics nodded. It never is. They had pulled records fast. Too fast if anyone bothered to notice. Flight swaps. Last-minute crew changes requested under the banner of safety. Always vague. Always approved. Always involving the same captain. "What about complaints?" Reynolds asked. 3 informal Park replied. 2 withdrawn. 1 reclassified as interpersonal conflict. Reynolds exhaled, and nobody escalated. They didn't feel protected, Park said. or they felt it wasn't worth it. Reynolds looked toward the glass wall overlooking the terminal. Denise Carter stood out there, speaking quietly with a flight attendant, who looked relieved to be talking to someone who was listening. She knew Reynolds said. Park didn't ask who he meant. She didn't just stumble into this. He continued. This flight, this captain, this timing. Park closed her tablet. That doesn't make it less real. No, Reynolds said. It makes it worse. Out by the gate, the head flight attendant, a woman named Karen Mitchell, adjusted the scarf at her neck. She had been flying for 22 years, long enough to know when the ground shifted beneath her feet. I've flown with Captain Caldwell before, she said quietly to Denise. He's particular. Denise tilted her head slightly. That's one word for it. Karen hesitated. Her fingers twisted together, knuckles whitening. He's never been overt, she said. Not in front of passengers, not on paper. But Denise said, but he makes decisions. Karen continued. And people adjust around them, because pushing back doesn't feel safe. Denise studied her, not with accusation, with something closer to understanding. What made you speak now? Denise asked. Karen swallowed. Because this time it wasn't subtle. Denise nodded. That was how these things broke. Not with explosions, with fractures that finally became visible. A chime sounded overhead. Another delay announcement. Polite, non-committal. The kind designed to buy time without promising resolution. A man near the charging station scoffed. This airline's gone downhill, he muttered to his wife. Used to mean something. Denise heard him. She wondered if he knew how often that sentence marked the moment when change became unavoidable. Her phone vibrated again. This time the caller did not identify herself with a title. Denise, the voice said. Familiar. Old. The kind that carried authority without needing to name it. Yes, Denise replied, stepping a few feet away from the gate. I've reviewed the preliminary notes, the voice continued. You're certain? Denise closed her eyes briefly. I am. A pause. Heavy. Weighted with history. Then we proceed, the voice said. But carefully. Denise opened her eyes. Across the terminal, Caldwell sat rigidly in a plastic chair near security, his uniform jacket folded on his lap like a flag taken down too early. He stared straight ahead, jaw set, refusing to acknowledge the sideways glances or the quiet whispers that followed him like static. He had already called his union rep. Twice. This is a misunderstanding, he said into the phone, his voice low and tight. They blindsided me. Some kind of internal politics. He listened, nodding sharply. Yes. Yes, I documented safety concerns. A beat. Well, I can't control how she took it. Another beat. I want representation on site. He ended the call and exhaled hard, forcing calm into his lungs. He had survived turbulence before. Management cycles, policy shifts, younger executives with grand ideas that faded as soon as they met reality. This would pass. It always did. What Caldwell did not see was the way the narrative was already slipping beyond his control. How the system he trusted was not circling the wagons this time, but opening files that had been sealed for years. Back in the conference room, Julia Park pulled up another report. "We've got a request from legal," she said. "They want to hold off on any public statement until the board is looped in." Reynolds nodded. "That's coming." How soon? Reynolds checked his watch. Soon enough. Outside boarding finally began. Not for Caldwell's flight. For the one next door. The contrast was brutal. Passengers streamed past tickets, scanned lives, moving forward while this gate remained frozen in limbo. Denise watched them go, then turned back to the waiting crowd. She stepped closer to the counter. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice carrying without amplification. "Calm. Steady. Thank you for your patience. We're resolving a crew issue. Safety remains our priority." Someone laughed bitterly. "That's what they always say." Denise met the man's gaze. "I know," she said. The honesty caught him off guard. He said nothing else. Behind her, Karen straightened a quiet resolve, settling into her posture. She had spent years believing silence was the cost of survival. Watching Denise stand there, unflinching, something inside her shifted. The delay stretched. Time thickened. And somewhere above it all, far from the gate and the murmurs and the controlled chaos, a decision waited to be spoken aloud, one that would not just determine the fate of a single flight or a single captain, but force a reckoning with everything this airline had allowed itself to become. Denise Carter felt it settling into place the way pressure built before a storm finally broke. She did not smile. She did not flinch. She waited. The announcement came without ceremony. No chime. No apology wrapped in corporate phrasing. Just a shift in posture at the gate desk, a subtle tightening of shoulders, and the quiet realization among the staff that whatever was unfolding was no longer contained. Mark Reynolds stepped out of the terminal office first. His jacket was back on. Buttoned. The look of a man who had crossed an internal line and accepted what came with it. Julia Park followed tablet, tucked against her side, like evidence instead of technology. Behind them walked two people. No one at the gate recognized, dressed plainly, moving with the calm confidence of professionals who did not need to explain why they were there. Denise Carter saw them immediately. She straightened not because she needed to, but because moments like this demanded precision. This was the point where stories began to fracture, where truth either became clear or was buried under procedure. Reynolds stopped a few feet from her. "We're escalating," he said quietly. Denise nodded. "I expected that." Julia Park glanced toward the waiting passengers. "They can't sit here indefinitely." "I know," Denise said, "but they also can't board under false pretenses." Reynolds studied her face. He had spent his career reading people in high-stress environments. Pilots, executives, regulators. Denise was different. There was no adrenaline in her eyes, no hunger for control. Just resolve, clean and unsettling. "You understand what happens next," Reynolds said. "Yes," Denise replied. "And I understand what happens if we don't." He held her gaze for a beat longer, then turned toward the gate desk. Karen Mitchell felt it before she heard it. The shift in the air. The way authority reoriented itself around the space. She took a step closer to Denise, not touching her, but aligning herself beside her. "I should be back there," Karen said, softly nodding toward the aircraft. "You will be," Denise replied. "Just not yet." Karen swallowed. Years of muscle memory told her to defer, to obey the last order she'd been given. But this was different. This felt like standing at the edge of something irreversible. Reynolds leaned toward the microphone at the gate. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice firm but measured. "Thank you for your patience. We are currently addressing an internal crew matter. This flight will not depart until that process is complete. We appreciate your understanding." A man near the front scoffed. "That's it. That's all you're going to tell us?" Reynolds met his eyes. "For now, yes." Phones came up. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Just enough to matter. Enough to mark the moment as something people would want proof of later. Across the terminal, Captain Caldwell watched from his seat near security. He had stopped pacing. The initial anger had burned itself out, leaving behind something colder. Calculation. He had seen management shifts before. He knew the language. Escalation meant delay. Delay meant negotiation. Negotiation meant leverage. They would not burn him publicly. Not a senior captain. Not with the union watching. Not with investors who hated uncertainty. He adjusted the crease in his trousers, smoothed his hair, and waited. His phone buzzed. "Union rep." "This is getting bigger than I thought," the voice said. "They've looped in legal." Caldwell snorted. "Of course they have. That's what they do when someone pushes back." A pause. "They're calling it refusal of duty." The rep continued. "That's serious." Caldwell's jaw tightened. "I didn't refuse. I exercised discretion." Another pause. Longer. "Discretion only works if they believe your reasons," the rep said. And right now they're not convinced. Caldwell glanced toward the gate, where Denise Carter stood, speaking quietly with Reynolds. He felt something twist in his gut. Not fear. Not yet. But the faint irritation of a man who sensed the ground shifting beneath his feet. "She planned this," he muttered. Back at the gate, Julia Park tapped her tablet, pulling up a secure channel. "The board is assembled," she said. "They're waiting." Denise inhaled slowly. She had not intended to force this today. That was the truth she carried quietly, even as events bent toward inevitability. She had hoped to observe, to document, to gather just enough evidence to begin change without spectacle. But systems rarely broke when it was convenient. "Patch me in," Denise said. They stepped away from the gate into a glass-walled conference room overlooking the terminal. The passengers could see them now. Silhouettes, shapes, movement without context. It made people uneasy. Uncertainty always did. The screen flickered to life. Faces appeared. Men and women, mostly older, mostly white, some familiar, some not. Board members, stakeholders. Guardians of a company that liked to think of itself as stable. Denise, one of them, said, "We weren't expecting this." "I know," she replied. "Are we certain this is necessary?" another asked. "There are protocols." "There were," Denise said. "They were ignored." A murmur rippled across the screen. This could become public, someone warned. Denise leaned forward slightly. "Not aggressive. Intentional." "It already is," she said. The question is whether we control the truth or let it leak through rumor and resentment. Silence. Then a voice Denise recognized immediately. Older, gravelly. The voice of someone who had seen industries rise and rot. Explain it, said. Denise did. Calmly. Precisely. She outlined the refusal, the obstruction, the pattern. She did not editorialize. She did not accuse beyond what the facts supported. She spoke the way pilots spoke in emergency briefings, clear, efficient, unemotional. When she finished, no one spoke for a moment. Finally, the same voice said, "What do you recommend?" Denise did not hesitate. "Remove the entire crew from duty pending review," she said. Not as punishment, as acknowledgement. This was not one man acting alone. It was a culture that allowed him to believe he could. A few faces stiffened. "That's drastic," someone said. "So is ignoring it," Denise replied. The voice returned. "And the captain, suspension," Denise said. "Immediate, with full investigation. Union present. Process followed." "And you," another asked. "Your role in this," Denise met the camera directly. "I accept whatever scrutiny comes with this decision," she said, "including my own." The line went quiet. Outside the conference room, Karen Mitchell watched through the glass. Her heart pounded. She had flown through turbulence that rattled her bones, but this felt heavier. This felt like watching gravity change direction. The call ended. Reynolds exhaled slowly. "They approved," he said. Denise closed her eyes for a fraction of a second. Not in relief, in acknowledgement. "Then let's do this right," she said. They stepped back into the terminal. Reynolds signaled to security. Two officers approached Caldwell. Captain Caldwell Reynolds said, his voice carrying just enough to be heard. "You are formally suspended, pending investigation. Please come with us." Caldwell stood, slowly, deliberately. He smiled thin and brittle. "This is a mistake," he said, "and you're going to regret it." Reynolds did not respond. As Caldwell was escorted away, Denise watched from a distance. Not triumph, not pity. Just the quiet weight of consequence settling into place. Around them, passengers whispered. Phones recorded. A story began to take shape, incomplete and imperfect, but undeniably alive. Denise Carter stood still at the center of it all, knowing the hardest part was not what she had just done. It was what came next. The first headline did not come from a news outlet. It came from a phone. A woman in row 12 tilted her screen toward her husband, eyes narrowed. "Someone just posted about a captain being pulled off a flight at DFW, she whispered. "Says it's about discrimination." Her husband frowned. Already. Across the gate, a man in a golf shirt chuckled under his breath. "Everything's a scandal now." But his laugh did not carry far. Too many people were looking at their screens. Too many fingers were scrolling with that peculiar intensity reserved for moments when the world felt slightly unhinged, and no one wanted to be the last to understand why. Denise Carter stood near the window, her reflection faint in the glass. The runway shimmered under rising heat. A tug rolled past driver, unaware that a single delay had begun to fracture something much larger than a schedule. Mark Reynolds approached her again, his voice lower now. "Union is on their way." Denise nodded. "I assumed they would be." "They're not happy," he added. "They rarely are when the system stops." "Bending," Denise said. Reynolds studied her for a moment. "You could step back," he said. "Let legal handle the next phase." She met his eyes. "If I step back now, it becomes a misunderstanding again." He did not argue. At the far end of the terminal, Captain Caldwell was placed in a small room near security. No cuffs, no raised voices, just a closed door and the sudden absence of the world he had once commanded. He paced twice, then stopped breathing hard through his nose. He pulled out his phone again. Another call to the Union. Straight to voicemail this time. He left a message anyway. "This is escalating beyond protocol," he said, forcing calm. "I need representation immediately." He ended the call and stared at the blank screen. Something unfamiliar crept into his chest. Not panic. Not yet. But the recognition that no one was rushing in to fix this for him. Back at the gate, Karen Mitchell gathered the rest of the cabin crew near the service desk. Their faces were tight eyes darting between passengers and supervisors. "What happens to us?" a younger attendant whispered. Karen hesitated. She had always had answers before. Procedures, reassurances. Today, all she had was honesty. "We tell the truth," she said quietly. "When we're asked." "That could cost us our jobs," another said. Karen's voice softened. "It already might." The words landed heavier than any announcement. A man in a dark blazer pushed through the crowd toward the gate desk, his presence unmistakable. Broad shoulders, confident stride. He wore a pin Denise recognized immediately. Union. He stopped in front of Reynolds, ignoring Denise entirely. "I'm Tom Gallagher," he said. "Senior Union Counsel. We need to talk." Reynolds gestured toward the conference room. "Of course." Gallagher glanced at Denise as they passed. His eyes lingered just long enough to register her face, her uniform, her composure. He catalogued her without acknowledging her authority. Yet. Inside the room, Gallagher wasted no time. "You can't suspend a senior captain without a hearing," he said. "You know that." Reynolds remained calm. "We relieved him of duty pending review. That is within protocol." Gallagher scoffed, on whose testimony Reynolds looked at Denise. Gallagher followed his gaze. His expression shifted subtle, but telling. Surprise flickered, then skepticism. "This is about her?" he asked. Denise did not respond. Gallagher turned back to Reynolds. "You're grounding a decorated captain over a subjective claim." Reynolds's voice sharpened. It was not subjective. "There are witnesses." Gallagher leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Then we'll see what the review says." Denise spoke then. Calm. Controlled. "We will." Gallagher finally looked at her directly. "You understand what you're doing," he said. "This will get ugly." Denise held his gaze. "So does pretending it didn't happen." Outside the gate, Agent announced complimentary water and meal vouchers, a small concession, barely enough to soften irritation. Passengers accepted them with forced smiles, some grateful, some annoyed, all increasingly aware that this delay was not ordinary. A man near the window began filming openly now, narrating under his breath. They pulled the captain. "Union's here. Something's going down." The camera caught Denise in the background, her profile sharp against the light. Comments began to stack beneath the video. Speculation bloomed like algae. Who is she? Why is the captain gone? Is this another corporate cover-up? Denise ignored it all. She had learned that attention was a weather system, loud, unpredictable, impossible to control once it formed. Reynolds's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then looked up at Denise. "Legal wants to brief the board again." Denise nodded. They should. "Media inquiries are coming in," he added. "Let them," Denise said. "We're not hiding." Inside the small room near security, Caldwell finally lost patience. He slammed his palm against the table, once the sound echoing off bare walls. "This is harassment," he muttered to no one. The door opened. A uniformed officer stepped in, neutral, professional. "Sir," he said, "we'll be escorting you out of the secure area." Caldwell stared at him. "I haven't been charged with anything." "This is administrative," the officer replied. Administrative. The word felt like an insult. Caldwell stood straightening his jacket one last time. As he walked through the terminal, eyes followed him now. Some curious, some judgmental, some quietly satisfied. He kept his head high, but inside something cracked. Back at the gate, Denise felt the shift before she saw it. The way conversations lowered, the way people leaned in, sensing the gravity of a moment approaching. Reynolds stepped up beside her. "The board wants you present when we address the passengers." Denise inhaled slowly. This was not part of the original plan, but plans rarely survived contact with reality. "Not yet," she said. "They don't need names, they need clarity." He nodded. "You'll speak?" "Yes." She stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," Denise said, her voice carrying without amplification. The terminal quieted. "Thank you for your continued patience. I know delays are frustrating. I know uncertainty is worse. What I can tell you is this: your safety is not negotiable. Not today. Not ever." A man folded his arms. "So are we flying or not?" Denise met his eyes. "Not with the wrong crew." The simplicity of the statement cut through the noise. A few heads nodded. Others remained skeptical. But no one laughed. Behind her, Karen Mitchell felt tears sting her eyes. Not from fear, from relief. Denise stepped back. Reynolds exhaled. "You realize," he said quietly, "that once this goes public, it won't stop at one captain." Denise looked out at the plane again. The gleaming fuselage, the weight of history pressed into aluminum and policy. "I know," she said. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. A single message from legal. Phase 3 authorized. Denise closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them. Whatever this airline was about to become, it would not be built on silence. And the people who had counted on silence to protect them were about to learn how loud the truth could be. The union arrived with confidence and left with questions. Tom Gallagher stood just outside the glass conference room, jacket draped over one arm, phone pressed hard to his ear. His voice was low, urgent, stripped of the bluster he had carried in with him. When he hung up, he did not turn back toward Denise Carter. Not immediately. He stared instead at the terminal floor, as if the polished tile might offer a version of events he preferred. Inside the room, Mark Reynolds closed the folder in front of him with deliberate care. "They've been notified," he said. "National office, legal. Everyone who needs to know." Denise nodded once. "Good." Reynolds hesitated. "They're asking who authorized this." Denise met his eyes. "Tell them the truth." Outside, the terminal had reached a new phase of waiting. Not irritation anymore. Attention. The low buzz of speculation had sharpened into something focused. People were no longer asking when the flight would leave. They were asking why it hadn't. A woman near the charging station whispered, "My brother flies for this airline. Says this kind of thing never gets addressed." Her friend shook her head. "Until it does?" Phones stayed raised now. Not everyone filming, but enough to matter. Enough to ensure that whatever happened next would not disappear into an internal memo. Karen Mitchell stood with the remaining attendants near the service corridor. Her hands were steady now. The fear had drained out, replaced by a strange clarity. She replayed the moment in the cockpit earlier that morning, the way Caldwell had spoken, the way she had looked down instead of speaking up. She would not do that again. A supervisor approached her. "Karen," he said quietly, "they'll want statements." "I know," she replied. "I'm ready." At the edge of the gate area, Denise felt the shift behind her before she heard it. Tom Gallagher stepped closer. "Ms. Carter," he said. She turned to face him. This time, he did not talk past her. This time, he looked directly at her, studying her face as if recalibrating. "You understand what this sets in motion," he said. "Yes," Denise replied. "You're challenging more than one captain." Gallagher continued. "You're challenging precedent." Denise's voice remained calm. "Precedent that protects misconduct isn't worth preserving." Gallagher exhaled sharply. "You're not wrong, but you're not naive either. You know the cost." She nodded. "I do." A long pause stretched between them. Around them the terminal hummed, oblivious to the weight of the exchange. Finally, Gallagher spoke again. "We won't block the investigation." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't support. But it wasn't resistance either. Denise inclined her head slightly. "That's all I ask." Gallagher stepped back into the crowd, already dialing another number. Minutes later, Reynolds's phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen, then at Denise. "We need to brief the passengers. Fully. Before someone else does it for us." Denise took a breath. Slow. Grounded. This was the moment she had delayed as long as she could, not because she feared it, but because words once spoken could not be retrieved. She stepped forward again, closer to the gate, desk closer to the waiting eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice steady but carrying. "Thank you for your patience. I owe you clarity." The terminal quieted. Even the background announcements seemed to fade. "My name is Denise Carter," she continued. "I am a qualified flight officer assigned to this route. I am also a member of this airline's leadership." A ripple moved through the crowd. Heads lifted, brows furrowed. This flight was delayed because a captain refused to operate with his assigned crew, Denise said. She did not name Caldwell. She did not need to. That refusal violated our safety procedures and our code of conduct. He has been removed from duty pending investigation." A murmur followed. Not outrage, recognition. "We will not ask you to board an aircraft until we are confident the crew operating it meets our standards," Denise continued. "That may require additional time. If you choose to rebook, our agents will assist you. If you choose to wait, we appreciate your trust." Silence settled in. Heavy, honest. Then slowly, a man near the front nodded. "That's all you had to say," he murmured. Another woman folded her arms, thoughtful. "Took guts," she said quietly. Not everyone was satisfied. A few scoffed. A few shook their heads. But no one shouted. No one accused her of lying. The truth had weight. It landed where it landed. Denise stepped back. Reynolds exhaled as if he'd been holding his breath for an hour. "Media's already picking it up," he said. "Local first. National soon." "Let them," Denise replied. In a quiet office upstairs, a screen flickered on. A group of executives watched the terminal feed in silence. They had approved this path. Now they were watching its consequences unfold in real time. One of them spoke softly. "We can't undo this." Another replied, "No. But we can decide what follows." Downstairs, a replacement crew arrived. Not hurried, not triumphant, just professionals answering a call. Karen watched them approach the aircraft, a knot loosening in her chest. This was what it should have felt like all along. Denise stood alone for a moment, her phone buzzing continuously now. Messages from legal, from compliance, from names she hadn't heard in years. Support, concern, warnings, gratitude. She did not answer them yet. Across the terminal, Caldwell sat outside the secure area jacket over his arm, watching the crowd move without him. He saw Denise speaking with Reynolds, saw the way people listened. For the first time, doubt pierced his certainty. Not about the decision he'd made that morning. About the world he thought would always make space for it. Back at the gate, boarding finally resumed. Slowly, carefully. Passengers moved with a different energy now. Not impatience. Awareness. As Denise watched them line up, she felt the weight of what she had done settle fully onto her shoulders. This was no longer about one flight, or one captain, or one delay. It was about what happened next in the days and months that followed when the cameras were gone and the real work began. And Denise Carter knew with a clarity that steadied her spine that there would be no quiet return to the way things were. There couldn't be. Not anymore. By nightfall, the story had a shape. It was no longer a rumor passed between delayed passengers or a shaky clip filmed from behind a carry-on. It had a headline, then another, then a third, each one sharpening the outline. A captain removed, a flight delayed, a senior crew under review. Words like protocol and safety and discrimination threaded together until the narrative began to pull on something deeper than inconvenience. Denise Carter watched the first segment play silently on a monitor near the crew office. The anchor's lips moved with powerful neutrality. The footage cut between the gate, the aircraft, the crowd. Her own face appeared briefly, profile only calm enough to unsettle people who expected either outrage or apology. She turned the sound off. In the operations wing, phones rang without pause. Not frantic. Persistent. The kind of ringing that signaled consequence rather than chaos. Mark Reynolds moved between rooms, jacket off, now sleeves rolled, voice steady as he repeated the same phrases with minor variations. Pending review. No further comment. Safety is our priority. Julia Park leaned against a counter, eyes scanning a live feed of social reactions. Not the shouting kind, the quieter kind. Long posts, thoughtful comments. Former crew members sharing experiences with measured restraint. The kind of testimony that didn't need volume to carry weight. This is spreading the way fires actually spread, she said to no one in particular. Slow, under the surface. Reynolds nodded. Those are the ones that burn the longest. Down in the terminal, the replacement crew completed boarding. The aircraft door closed with a solid, reassuring thud. The jet pushed back engines, rising into a controlled roar that vibrated through the glass. A few passengers pressed their palms to the windows, watching the plane roll away with a strange sense of ownership, as if they had earned the right to witness its departure. Karen Mitchell stood with the remaining attendants, watching the taillights disappear into the night. Her shoulders sagged, tension finally releasing. "We'll be called in," one of the younger attendants said. "Won't we?" Karen nodded. "Yes." "For statements?" "Yes, for everything." Karen looked at her. "Then we tell everything." The words felt different now. Not dangerous. Necessary. Outside the secure area, Robert Caldwell waited for his ride. The terminal had thinned the evening rush, replaced by tired travelers and custodial crews. He sat rigidly on a bench, hands clasped, eyes fixed on nothing. His phone lay face down beside him. It had stopped buzzing an hour ago. When he finally turned it over, there were missed calls. From the union. From a colleague he had mentored once. From his wife. He did not call her back. Instead, he opened a browser and typed his own name. The results loaded slowly. Too slowly. When they appeared, his breath caught. Not because the facts were wrong, but because the framing was unfamiliar. He was not the authority in these stories. He was the subject. A clip autoplayed. His voice clipped and controlled, insisting on discretion. Denise's calm reply barely audible beneath the ambient noise. The caption beneath it asked a question he did not like. How often does safety mean exclusion? He closed the phone. Back upstairs, the board reconvened. Not formally. No gavel. No agenda. Just a secure line and faces that looked older under fluorescent light. "We're exposed," one member said. "Legally and reputationally. We're accountable," another corrected. Denise sat at the far end of the table, hands folded, listening. She had not been invited to speak yet. She had learned long ago that silence used deliberately could be its own argument. A voice crackled through the speaker. "We need to know how far this goes." Denise raised her eyes. "As far as the evidence takes us," she said. A murmur followed. "And if it implicates more senior staff?" someone asked. Denise did not look away. "Then we act accordingly. That could destabilize operations," another warned. "Stability built on silence isn't stable," Denise replied. The room fell quiet. One of the older members leaned back, studying her. "You're asking us to accept a period of uncertainty." Yes, Denise said. In exchange for integrity. The word hung there, unadorned. Outside the airport, lights burned against the dark. Planes rose and fell. The system continued to move even as it examined itself. Later, Denise walked alone through a corridor lined with framed photographs. Aircraft deliveries, retirements, milestones celebrated with smiles and speeches. She stopped in front of one image she knew well. A black and white photo of a younger airline, smaller planes, fewer promises. She touched the glass lightly, then moved on. Her phone vibrated again. A message from legal. We've identified prior internal memos connected to Caldwell. Some flagged, some closed without action. Another message followed. Media requests escalating. They want an on-record interview. Denise typed a brief response. Tomorrow. She stepped outside into the humid night air, the sounds of the airport muted behind her. For the first time since morning, she allowed herself to feel the weight of exhaustion. Not physical, moral. The kind that came from choosing a path you knew would not curve back toward comfort. A car pulled up. Reynolds leaned out the window. You need a ride. She nodded and got in. As they drove, the city lights streaked past reflections, sliding across the windshield. Neither spoke for a while. Finally, Reynolds said, They're starting to ask who you are. Denise smiled faintly. They always do. You didn't have to be here today, he said. You could have handled this from a distance. She looked out at the road. Distance is how this survived. Reynolds considered that. When this becomes public in full, he said, they'll say you orchestrated it. They'll be wrong, Denise replied. I responded to it. And when they find out what position you actually hold. Denise's jaw tightened slightly. Then they'll stop talking about one captain. The car slowed at a light. A news van passed in the opposite direction. Logo bright against the dark. Reynolds glanced at her. Are you ready for that? Denise closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them. I've been ready for years. They drove on. Behind them in the quiet spaces of the terminal, staff cleaned floors and emptied bins, unaware that by morning, policies would be rewritten, meetings, scheduled careers questioned, that the line between what had always been tolerated and what would no longer be ignored had shifted. Denise Carter looked ahead, the road unfolding into darkness and possibility. The truth had not finished surfacing. It was only gathering momentum. Morning did not bring clarity. It brought pressure. The sun rose over Dallas like nothing had happened, casting clean light across runways and glass terminals that had absorbed the night's tension without complaint. Flights departed. Arrivals rolled in. Coffee was poured. Announcements echoed. The machinery of normalcy resumed, even as something underneath it strained. Denise Carter stood at the edge of the operations floor, watching a wall of screens cycle through departures. She had slept for 2 hours, maybe less. It showed only in the tightness around her eyes, not in her posture. She had learned how to function when rest was a luxury, and resolve was not. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from legal. Another from compliance. Another from communications. Each one carrying a different version of the same truth. This was no longer internal. The first request came from a morning news producer, polite, framed as an opportunity. The second was sharper, asking whether the airline had a history of discrimination complaints it had failed to address. The third was not a request at all. It was a notification that an investigative piece was already in progress. Mark Reynolds approached with a paper cup of coffee and set it down beside her without comment. "You should eat," he said. "In a minute," Denise replied. He watched her for a beat. "They're pulling files." She nodded. "I expected that." "Not just Caldwell's," he added. "Training records, performance reviews, crew assignments going back years." "That's where the answers are," Denise said. Reynolds exhaled. "And the damage." She turned to face him. "Only if we pretend it isn't there." Across the room, Julia Park stood with a small group from Ethics and Compliance. Their voices were low, focused. Names appeared on screens, timelines aligned, patterns sharpened. The work was methodical, unglamorous, and absolutely necessary. At 10:45 in the morning, the union issued a statement, measured, defensive, concerned. It spoke of due process and fairness and the importance of protecting pilots from hasty judgment. It did not mention the refusal. It did not mention the obstruction. It did not mention Denise Carter by name. Denise read it once, then set her phone down. "They're circling," Reynolds said. "They always do," Denise replied, "until they realize the ground has shifted." In a quiet office down the hall, Robert Caldwell sat across from his attorney, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles ached. The attorney spoke in practiced tones, outlining options, strategies, possible outcomes. "We push back on procedure," the attorney said. "Focus on seniority. Argue discretion." Caldwell nodded, but his eyes kept drifting to the muted television in the corner. Denise's face appeared again, this time blurred, framed by headlines that did not use his name yet, but might soon. "What about her?" Caldwell asked suddenly. The attorney frowned. "What about her?" "She's not just a pilot," Caldwell said. "You can tell. No one moves like that unless they've got some cover." The attorney hesitated. "We don't know her position." Caldwell leaned forward. "Find out." Back on the operations floor, Denise met with the communications team. They sat around a table, laptops, open expressions tight. "They want a quote," one of them said. "On the record." Denise folded her hands. "Not yet. They'll speculate if we don't another warned." "They already are," Denise said. "Speculation is cheaper than truth. Let them spend their energy." A younger staffer shifted in his chair. "With respect," he said, "the longer we wait, the more they control the narrative." Denise looked at him. "Not unkindly." "Directly. We're not here to win a news cycle. We're here to change a system." The room fell quiet. At noon, the board reconvened. This time Denise was not at the edge of the table. She sat squarely within it. The questions came fast. Financial exposure, operational risk, public trust, union backlash, investor confidence. Denise answered them all. Not with reassurance, with clarity. "This will cost us," she said. "In time, in money, in comfort." A board member frowned. "Then why proceed?" "Because the alternative costs more," Denise replied. "It costs credibility. And once that's gone, everything else follows." Another member leaned forward. You're asking us to support a process that may implicate people we've worked with for decades." "Yes," Denise said. "I am." Silence followed. Heavy. Honest. Finally, the chair spoke. "Proceed." The word did not sound triumphant. It sounded inevitable. Outside the boardroom, Karen Mitchell waited with a folder clutched to her chest. Inside were notes she had taken late the night before. Memories she had once dismissed as isolated moments, now laid out in ink. When Julia Park called her in, Karen's hands shook briefly, then steadied. She told the truth. Not dramatically, not vindictively, just carefully. What she had seen, what she had heard, what she had ignored. When she finished, Julia closed the folder and looked up. "Thank you," she said. Karen nodded. Tears pricked her eyes, not from fear, but from release. By mid-afternoon, a name leaked. Not Caldwell's, Denise's, not her title. Just her face paired with a question mark. "Who is she?" The question spread faster than the answers. Denise watched it unfold with a distant calm. She had known this moment would come. The reveal was no longer a matter of if, but when. Reynolds approached her again, tension evident now. "They're asking directly." Denise inhaled slowly. "Then we stop dodging." "When?" She glanced at the clock. "End of day." Reynolds nodded. "I'll prepare the room." As the afternoon wore on, the airport buzzed with an undercurrent of anticipation. Staff whispered. Executives retreated into offices. Cameras lingered longer than usual at entrances. Denise retreated briefly to a quiet hallway and leaned against the wall, closing her eyes. She thought of the years she had spent listening instead of speaking, watching instead of acting, gathering evidence not because she enjoyed secrecy, but because she understood systems did not change when confronted with noise alone. They changed when confronted with proof. Her phone vibrated one last time before the meeting. A message from legal. "Caldwell's counsel is requesting clarification on your authority." Denise typed a single reply. "They'll have it shortly." As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the terminal floor, Denise straightened and walked toward the conference room. Cameras were already set up outside. Voices hushed as she passed. This was not the end. It was not even the climax. It was the moment before truth stepped fully into the light, when the air grew still, and everyone sensed that whatever came next would redraw the boundaries they had learned to live within. Denise Carter opened the door and walked in. The room was already full when Denise Carter stepped inside. Cameras lined one wall, their small red lights glowing like patient eyes. Microphones crowded the center table, angled upward, waiting. Reporters stood, shoulder to shoulder, notebooks, ready expressions, sharpened by hours of speculation and caffeine. The low hum of whispered guesses died the moment the door closed behind her. Denise did not rush to the chair at the head of the table. She walked slowly, deliberately, the sound of her shoes against the floor measured and even. She felt every gaze settle on her, weighing, comparing, searching for cracks. She had stood in cockpits during violent turbulence. This was quieter, but no less unforgiving. Mark Reynolds took a seat to her right, Julia Park to her left, legal counsel further down the table. The configuration was not accidental. Denise sat last. A reporter broke first. "Ms. Carter, can you clarify your role in yesterday's incident?" Denise placed her hands flat on the table. The gesture was small grounding. "Yes," she said. Her voice carried without effort. "I can." Another voice cut in. "Are you a pilot, or are you an executive?" Denise did not answer immediately. She looked across the room, meeting faces one by one. Young reporters hungry for a career-making clip. Older ones who had seen scandals rise and fall, who understood when a story crossed from incident to reckoning. "I am both," she said. A ripple moved through the room. A third reporter leaned forward. "With respect, ma'am, your name does not appear on the executive leadership page." "That is correct," Denise said. "Not yet." Cameras adjusted. Fingers hovered over record buttons. Denise continued, her tone steady. "For the past several months, I have been flying under my operational credentials, not my corporate title. That was a deliberate decision." "Why?" someone asked. "Because policies look different from the ground," Denise replied, "and cultures reveal themselves when they think no one important is watching." The room went still. A senior reporter narrowed her eyes. "Are you saying this incident was orchestrated?" Denise shook her head. "No. I am saying it was allowed to happen." She paused, letting the distinction settle. "I did not provoke a refusal," Denise said. "I documented one." Mark Reynolds shifted slightly beside her. The reporters noticed. They always noticed. Another question came fast. "Then what authority did you have to remove a senior captain?" Denise inhaled once. "At the time of the incident, she said I was acting within my operational authority as an assigned crew member to escalate a safety and conduct violation. The subsequent decision to suspend Captain Caldwell was made by flight operations and compliance." That did not satisfy them. She could see it in their eyes. And now a reporter pressed. "What authority do you have now?" Denise reached into her blazer pocket. The motion was subtle, but it drew every camera closer. She placed a badge on the table. Not her pilot credentials. Something else. Clean. Minimal. Corporate. "My full name is Denise Carter," she said. "I am the chair of the board and majority shareholder of this airline." The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy, pressurized, the kind of silence that made people aware of their own breathing. A reporter whispered "Jesus" under his breath. Another asked voice barely controlled, "Why hide that?" Denise met her gaze. "Because power changes behavior. And I needed to see how people behaved without it." The questions exploded then. Voices overlapping, accusations, admiration, disbelief. "So you were testing your own company. Isn't this entrapment? Did the board approve this? Was Captain Caldwell set up?" Denise raised one hand. "Not commanding, clarifying. I did not set a trap," she said. I removed a mask. The room quieted again. For years, Denise continued. This airline has measured itself by on-time performance, profit margins, and safety records. Those metrics matter. But they are incomplete. Because safety is not only mechanical, it is cultural. She glanced briefly at Julia Park, then back to the room. When a captain can block a qualified crew member from the cockpit based on personal discomfort and expect no consequence that is not discretion, that is entitlement. A reporter scoffed. He says it was about crew chemistry. Denise nodded. It usually is. A few quiet laughs broke out, quickly stifled. Denise's voice did not harden. It deepened. Crew chemistry has been used for decades as a polite cover for exclusion. It sounds neutral. It isn't. Someone asked, "Is he fired?" Denise answered carefully. "Captain Caldwell has been suspended, pending a full investigation with union representation and due process. If violations are confirmed, termination will follow." "And the rest of the crew?" another voice pressed. Denise did not dodge it. "Those who actively enabled misconduct will face consequences. Those who remained silent will undergo review and retraining. Silence is not neutral." A reporter leaned back, shaking his head slowly. "You realize this will open floodgates?" "Yes," Denise said. "They should have been opened a long time ago." The final question came from the back of the room. An older man, voice calm, practiced. "Ms. Carter." "Why now?" Denise considered him for a moment. "Because I inherited more than an airline," she said. "I inherited its history, the good and the bad. And I was taught that leadership is not about protecting what you built. It's about deciding what you're willing to dismantle." No one spoke after that. Denise stood. "This investigation will continue," she said. "Our policies will change. Our training will change. Some people will be uncomfortable. That is not a side effect. It is the point." She gathered her badge and slipped it back into her pocket. "We will release a full statement tomorrow," Denise added. "Until then, this is all I will say." She turned and walked out. Cameras followed her into the hallway, flashes bouncing off glass and steel. She did not stop. She did not look back. Downstairs in a quiet office near the legal wing, Robert Caldwell sat with his attorney as a junior associate, rushed in, face pale. "They just confirmed it," the associate said. "She's the board chair." Caldwell felt the room tilt. The woman he had dismissed, the authority he had assumed would protect him, the system he believed would bend. All of it reassembled in his mind, sharp and unforgiving. Outside, night fell again over the airport. Flights continued to arrive and depart, unaware that one refusal, one quiet escalation had cracked open a truth that could no longer be contained. Denise Carter stepped into the waiting car, exhaustion settling into her bones at last. This was not victory. This was responsibility. And it had only just begun. The fallout did not come all at once. It arrived in waves. By the next morning, the airline's headquarters felt different. Not louder. Not chaotic. Quieter. Conversations lowered when Denise Carter walked past. Doors that used to stay closed opened just a little wider. People who had spent years perfecting the art of invisibility, who met her eyes unsure whether to feel seen or exposed. Denise noticed everything. The way a senior manager straightened his tie when she entered the elevator. The way an assistant paused before speaking, then chose honesty over polish. These were not signs of fear. They were signs of recalibration. In a conference room overlooking the runway, the first policy review meeting began. No speeches, no slogans, just documents spread across a long table and the steady sound of pages turning. Compliance reports, training protocols, internal memos that had once been labeled resolved without ever being addressed. Mark Reynolds spoke first. We've identified 6 additional incidents with similar language. Different routes, same pattern. Julia Park added. And 14 complaints that were downgraded to interpersonal issues. Denise listened, hands folded, eyes steady. Each number landed with weight. Not shock, confirmation. We correct this, Denise said finally, by changing how authority works when no one is watching. The room stayed silent, attentive. From now on, she continued, any crew member can pause an operation for conduct concerns without retaliation. That includes captains, especially captains. A few people shifted in their seats. The old hierarchy did not collapse. It adjusted reluctantly, like a structure learning new gravity. By noon, the changes were official. Not announced yet, but real. Across the city, Robert Caldwell sat in his living room. The television muted legal documents spread across his coffee table. His uniform jacket hung untouched on the back of a chair. The weight of it felt different now, like something borrowed instead of earned. His attorney spoke carefully. They're expanding the investigation. Caldwell nodded, staring at his hands. He had replayed the moment in the cockpit 100 times. The tone he used, the assumption he carried, the certainty that the system would catch him before he fell. It had not. At the airport, Karen Mitchell stood in a training room with a small group of flight attendants. No uniforms, no ranks, just chairs in a circle and a facilitator who asked them to speak freely. Karen went first. I thought staying quiet kept the peace, she said. It didn't. It just delayed the damage. No one interrupted. No one corrected her. The room held her words with care. Back in operations, Denise watched a new crew prepare for departure. Different faces, same aircraft. The checklist ran smoothly. Voices calm. Professional. The way it was supposed to be. She felt a hand brush her sleeve. It was a mechanic, older, graying at the temples. Ma'am, he said, hesitating. I just wanted to say thanks. For what Denise asked. For making it easier to tell the truth, he replied. She nodded once. That was enough. The official press statement went out that afternoon. Clear, direct, no spin. It acknowledged failures without excuses and outlined steps without grandstanding. Some commentators praised it. Others called it overdue. Both were right. Stock dipped briefly, then stabilized. By the end of the week, the headlines shifted from the incident to the aftermath. Policy reforms, cultural reckoning, an airline choosing transparency over convenience. Denise did not read them all. She spent her evenings reviewing reports, meeting with crews, listening more than she spoke. Leadership, she had learned, was not about visibility. It was about accountability. On Friday morning, she stood at the edge of a hangar as a newly painted aircraft rolled out sunlight, catching the fresh lettering along its side. The name had not changed. The promise behind it had. Mark Reynolds joined her. We'll lose some people, he said. Yes, Denise replied, and we'll keep the ones who matter. He glanced at her. You could have waited longer. Made it quieter. She shook her head. Quiet is how this survived. The first flight under the new protocol departed that afternoon. No ceremony. No applause. Just a smooth taxi engines lifting wheels, leaving the ground with practiced grace. Denise watched until the plane disappeared into the sky. For the first time since that morning in Dallas, she allowed herself to exhale fully. This was not redemption. It was responsibility carried forward one decision at a time. And for the people watching this story unfold, whether they were pilots, passengers, or simply someone who had once been told to stay quiet for the sake of comfort, it meant something larger than an airline. It meant that dignity was not negotiable. That authority without accountability would always fail. That silence, once broken, could not be put back where it belonged. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment 3 words that matter to you.